Hello everybody. In this video we're going to discuss observational studies and designed experiments. Our learning objectives are to distinguish between an observational study and experiment and explain the various types of observational studies. Let's begin with an example. Researcher Joachim Schwitz and associates wanted to investigate cancer risk among Danish cellular phone users who were followed for up to 21 years. To do so, they kept track of 420,095 people whose first cellular telephone's subscription was between 1982 and 1995. In 2002, they recorded the number of people out of the 420,095 people who had a brain tumor and compared the rate of brain tumors in this group to the rate of brain tumors in the general population. They found no significant difference in the rate of brain tumors between the two groups. The researchers concluded cellular telephone was not associated with increased risk of brain tumor. Here is another example. Researchers Joseph L. Rotti and associates examined whether chronic exposure to radio frequency, RF, radiation at two common cell phone signals, 835.62 megahertz, a frequency used by analog cell phones, and 847.74 megahertz, a frequency used by digital cell phones, caused brain tumor in rats. The rats in group 1 were exposed to the analog cell phone frequency. The rats in group 2 were exposed to the digital frequency. The rats in group 3 served as a control and received no radiation. The exposure was done for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 years. After 505 days of exposure, the researchers reported the following. After analyzing the data, we found no statistically significant increase in any tumor type, including brain, liver, lung, or kidney, compared to the control group. In both studies, the goal of the research was to determine if the radio frequencies from cell phones increased the risk of contracting brain tumors, whether or not brain cancers was contracted in the response variable, the level of cell phone usage in the explanatory variable. In research, we wish to determine how varying the amount of explanatory variable affects the value of the response variable. So we can conduct two types of studies. We can conduct an observational study, or we can design an experiment to study those effects. An observational study measures the value of the response variable without attempting to influence the value of either of the response variable or the explanatory variable. That is, in an observational study, the researcher observes the behavior of the individuals in the study without trying to influence the outcome of the study, just like example number 1. If a researcher assigns the individuals in a study to a certain group, intentionally changes the values of the explanatory variable, and then records the values of the response variable for each group, the researcher is conducting a designed experiment, just like example number 2. Let's look at another example. Researchers wanted to determine the long-term benefits of the influenza vaccine on seniors aged 65 years and older. The researchers looked at the records of over 36,000 seniors for 10 years. The seniors were divided into two groups. Group 1 were seniors who chose to get a flu vaccination shot. The group 2 were seniors who chose not to get a flu vaccination shot. After observing the seniors for 10 years, it was determined that the seniors who got flu shot are 27% less likely to be hospitalized for pneumonia or influenza, and 48% less likely to die from pneumonia or influenza. Based on these results of the study, would you recommend that seniors go out and get a flu shot? The study may have flaws, namely confounding. Confounding in a study occurs when the effect of two or more explanatory variables are not separated. Therefore, any relation that may exist between an explanatory variable and the response variable may be due to some other variable or variables not accounted for in the study. We call this variable or these variables a lurking variable or lurking variables. A lurking variable is an explanatory variable that was not considered in the study, but that affects the value of the response variable in the study. In addition, lurking variables are typically related to an explanatory variable considered in the study. Some lurking variables in the influenza study could be age, health status, or mobility of the seniors, maybe the food they eat, maybe their lifestyle, whether they exercise or not. So many lurking variables can be affecting this study. So even after accounting for the potential lurking variables, the authors of the study concluded that getting an influenza shot is associated with a lower risk of being hospitalized or dying from influenza. We cannot control those lurking variables, specifically if our study is an observational study. A confounding variable is an explanatory variable that was considered in the study whose effect cannot be distinguished from a second explanatory variable in the study. There are many types of observational studies, and here are some of them. Cross-sectional studies. Those are observational studies that collect information about the individuals at a specific point in time or over a very short period of time. The second type of observational studies is case control studies. Those studies are retrospective, meaning that they require individuals to look back in time or require the researcher to look at an existing records. In case control studies, individuals who have certain characteristics are matched with those that do not. Cohort studies. A cohort study first identifies a group of individuals to participate in the study, which is a cohort. The cohort is then observed over a long period of time. Over this time period, characteristics about the individuals are recorded. Because data is collected over time, cohort studies are prospective. Let's look at some examples of types of observational studies. Let's look at the first example. We want to determine whether each of the following studies depicts an observational study or an experiment. If the researchers conducted an observational study, we want to determine the type of the observational study. So, researchers wanted to assess the long-term psychological effect on children evacuated during World War II. They obtained a sample of 169 former evacuees and control group of 43 people who were children during the war but were not evacuated. The subjects' mental state were evaluated using questionnaires. It was determined that the psychological well-being of the individual was adversely affected by evacuation. This is, of course, an observational study, and it is a case control study because it's a retrospective observational study. Here's another example. Xylitol has proven effective in preventing dental caries or cavities when included in food or gum. A total of 75 Peruvian children were given milk with and without xylitol and were asked to evaluate the taste of each. Overall, the children preferred the milk flavored with xylitol. This is, of course, a designed experiment because we're not observing, we are controlling the group, and we are giving the group of children, the 75 children, milk that is flavored with xylitol. So this is a designed experiment, it's not an observational study. A total of 974 homeless women in Los Angeles area were surveyed to determine their level of satisfaction with the healthcare provided by shelter clinics versus the healthcare provided by the government clinics. The women reported greater quality satisfaction with the shelters and outreach clinics compared to the government clinics. This is an observational study, and it is a cross-sectional studies because it is done over a short period of time or at a certain point of time. The last one, the cancer prevention study, is conducted by the American Cancer Society. Its goal is to determine the relationship among environmental and lifestyle factors on cancer cases by tracking approximately 1.2 million men and women. Study participants completed an individual study questionnaire in 1982, providing information on a range of lifestyle factors such as diet, alcohol, tobacco use, occupation, medical history, and family cancer history. These data have been determined extensively in relation to cancer mortality. Vital status of study participants is updated biannually. Cause of death has been documented for over 98% of all deaths that have occurred. Mortality follow-up of the CPS-2 participants is complete through 2002 and is expected to continue for many years. This is an observational study, and this is a cohort observational study because it follows a group of people over a long period of time, and it continues following those individuals for a very long period of time. And this is one of the prospective studies. A census is a list of all individuals in a population along with certain characteristics for each individual. Most of the governments do that every year. They collect information about the population